Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for joining me today and coming in to re-record. Ladies and gentlemen, we are re-recording our interview with Miss Phaedra Chojnacki, guest host of the podcast show The Fearless Road. There were some technical difficulties and some sound issues from our pre-recorded session, so now we are redoing it. This is the lessons we learn. These are the things we have to do in order to make sure we get good quality recordings. So thank you for joining us again. Well, you didn't join us the last time, so this is the first time. So that's fine. You don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, technical difficulties aside, this is part of why we do pre-recordings without guests so that we can iron out all
Yeah,
the
this is why
wrinkles.
we. Exactly. This is part of the journey of how do you maintain authenticity and that kind of feeling with your recordings, but still also ensure that you are keeping it professional, editing and what have you. It's sort of like where's this sort of fine line between taking out the mistakes because they really don't need to be seen and leaving in the awkward moments that give you more human, relevance. So this is a practice for us. We'll figure it out one way or the other.
Right.
But you're
Well, and
definitely going to
also
get
it's
us.
right. But also it's kind of like, we did a practice interview just to get in the swing of things and make sure our questions were in the right order. And then we
Yes,
recorded the actual interview, and now here we are in a place where we have to do it again and try and make sure that it doesn't feel rehearsed while also still being authentically vulnerable. So,
exactly.
but I'm sure completely different answers to a certain extent will come up on some of these questions. So don't worry about
And
it. It
so
all
that's
depends on the
that
day
is
and the
something
mood,
I'm
right?
well, that's something that I was thinking about from our last interview as well, and a couple of the personal video recordings that I've been doing. My answers are shifting. It's not that my truth about these things are shifting, but where I'm at and how I'm thinking about them and what my focus is on them. Um,
Hmm.
as I learn more about fear, as I study more about fear, as I hear more about the fearless road and the fearless journey and other people discussing it, from Simon Sinek, Brene Brown, um, even Oprah's got some incredible stuff. It begins to plant all these seeds in my brain about where I've been going with my ideas about fear and the journey
Hmm.
that I've been on. It's clear to me that I am slowly shifting my understanding, and when that happens, my perspective begins to adjust as well. So my answers and responses, I think, will also adjust. So it's okay. We're both on this journey, right? This is what this show's about, and that's sort of the point.
Right. And the evolution. And don't mind Lola. She's clingy. I'm sure she'll pop
Well,
up
let's go
here and there
ahead.
during the
Let's go
recording.
ahead and introduce her. Exactly. Introduce Lola. Who is
Everybody,
Lola for the audience who
this
doesn't
is, come
know?
on, look at the camera. That's Lola. She is my 16-year-old ancient lap kitty who likes to cling on me like a leech half the time, um,
Well,
and is
I'm
very
sure
active and floppy right now.
we will be seeing her plenty during the
I'm sure.
just to get a little background, obviously, on you and your life and how you made it to the Fearless Road podcast. Let the audience know or get us brought up to speed about a little bit about you, your background, both professionally and your personal journey, and then how you wound up here with us on the Fearless Road.
Okay. So, um, I guess the start of my career, which has been over 30 years in food and beverage, both in the service industry and restaurants, as well as on the retail side of things a little bit later on. Um, my personal journey with food started when I was very young. I was 4 and wanted to help my mother in the kitchen. And so that led to a lifetime love affair with food. I started out helping her every night, preparing meals, unless homework obviously interfered because schoolwork is way more important than cooking dinner when you're a child. Or so they thought. It really doesn't matter now. um,
Right.
so grew up side by side with my mom, learning how to cook. Um, and then when I started working in the restaurant industry at the age of 17, I realized very quickly that's what I wanted to do. Originally, I had thought about some other career choices, which everything fell by the wayside once I got into a restaurant, and I loved it. Um, so I was very much a student of my profession as I went through that because of my love for food. I was, cooking all the time at home, baking, looking in cookbooks. Once the food blogs came out, researching all that stuff, watching Food Network back in its heyday. I don't think it's nearly as good now as it used to be, but that's my personal opinion, and it might be controversial. Um, so just a lot of time in the kitchen and a lot of time studying and learning about food and new and various types of cuisine. So as I progressed through my restaurant career, I worked my way up into management, did that for quite a long time in a few different concepts, and then moved to the retail side of things, which was a completely different experience. And then work became a little patchier when I came back to Texas because my mother was ill. And so I took some time off to take care of her after she passed away. I wound up doing some traveling and taking some time for personal care. Wound up with a couple contract positions, helping out with some big events that got canceled due to the pandemic. Took some more time off, waited tables for a while, wound up managing for a short stint, and now I'm back here preparing for a trip that Michael and I leave on in 3 days. And once we get back from that, we will finish up packing and moving me to Colorado. So, and then there I will begin a business of my own. So, doing board, charcuterie, cheese, brunch, dessert, hot chocolate, whatever the mood strikes, I will figure out a board to do for it. So, there we go.
So your lifetime experience in food and beverage and service, how does that lend itself to being a part of the Fearless Road podcast and speaking to other entrepreneurs, business people, thought leaders, subject matter experts in business? I would just say in general in business, right? So how do you feel like that applies for you?
While a majority of my career was in a corporate restaurant environment, I had the luck for a majority of my career, both in restaurants and in the retail environment, to have had two different GMs who were into working outside the box within reason. And so being creative, trying different ideas, different things to drive sales, even though they weren't the corporately approved way to do things, has just kind of been part of my MO, especially from my mentor, Brian James, who you're familiar with. He taught
Yes.
me a lot about being creative and trying new and different things and giving it a shot. And I think that's a very important quality to have as an entrepreneur. You're constantly trying new things, and then making the decision to, okay, continue with this tack even though it might not be working. Maybe we tweak it, maybe we go, okay, this whole idea doesn't even work, we're just going to quit it and figure out the next thing to do. And I also, like you, Michael, listen to a ton of podcasts. And one of my favorite ones is We Can Do Hard Things with Glennon Doyle. And she consistently talks about how much she quits things when they're not right. And that quitting is her favorite
Yes.
thing to do, because if she doesn't quit doing the thing that's wrong, she can't find the thing that's right.
Oh, that's a good point. And so how do you feel that how do you feel that this set of experiences, and I think because I know you well, your passion and your interests where they lie, provides you, what does that provide for you with regards to being an interviewer for guests on the show? What do you think that brings to the table for you?
Well, I mean, ooh, that's a good question. Um, I have a wide and varied network of people, both here in the Dallas area and in Colorado from when I lived there before. Outside of cooking and, making craft cocktails and that sort of thing, uh, I have a very wide and broad, um, somewhat general knowledge base of all sorts of different things. I just have one of those brains that stuff pops in and it's unique and it'll sit there forever and pop out at the weirdest time, but that usually makes sense in the moment. Um, and I think with the different aspects of business that I've encountered and worked in restaurants and in the retail side of things, and all the different personalities and all the different ways of doing business and driving sales, it gives me just a very broad base, um, to be able to understand and empathize and, just really understand what's going on with these with people as they travel their journey, because I've been on a massive journey of my own as well.
And do you feel that prepares you to be a good interviewer?
Oh, sure. I think, um, the more experience we have, the wider our experiences are. The more that we travel and expose ourselves to, different cultures and truly learn about it, as opposed to only taking like the major tourist trip, but really kind of
Mm.
delve into getting to know, the people and the community that you're visiting is very important and gives you a wider understanding, um, of what's going on with people, and just kind of prepares you better for almost everything in life.
So I think that this is a, I love your analogy. I don't know if you realize you just made one, but if journeying around the world and visiting new places and getting into the cultures and discovering things about the people and the stuff there is something that you're passionate about and interested in, the journey that we're on for the Fearless Road invites you to do exactly the same thing with our guests, which is to share their culture and their experiences and find out more about them on the platform of a podcast, as opposed to like visiting them in their hometown or their home place. So I think that's
Hmm.
incredibly insightful and
Hmm.
really cool, because I feel like you'll treat them as if you're visiting their space, and taking a genuine interest in their experiences and what they have to offer. So it'll be kind of cool to see what you come up with in terms of your interview questions and how you interact with them.
Yeah, I think that's it. It wasn't an intentional analogy, but apparently it's something that's kind of been simmering in the back of my mind on the, synchronicity of us launching this podcast, and then, this trip for, um,
Yeah.
one of your
Yes.
good friends' wedding coming up at the same time, and that they overlap. And originally, that was not your plan at all, Michael. Was for these things to overlap.
No,
Circumstances and
no, not
life
at all.
intervened. Um,
Yeah.
and the podcast keeps getting pushed back, which is, fine, not ideal, but we're we're rolling with the punches. I feel like you a bit more than me, um, but we'll get there in the end. And there's a reason why this synchronicity is happening. The universe has sent this to us both at the same time for a reason, and it's going to be really interesting to see how you and I taking this break on this 2 week trip exploring Europe is, without working on the podcast and truly taking a break and immersing ourselves in the experience and enjoying it, will help reset for us, and hopefully just start the creativity flowing a lot more, because when you get so immersed in work, it's difficult to stay focused and creative at times, because there's so much of the mundane happening, and you need those moments of inspiration.
So the building on that idea that you're talking about, which is to take time out to fill your cup, take time out to regenerate and recoup, right? And get that energy back that you need, because a lot of what we will be doing is really pouring a lot of energy into the show, into the episodes, into development and production, as well as into our guests, right? So that we say 100% there. There's no such thing. There's always a percentage of you that's divided and multitasking, or perhaps in other places. But we try to bring 100% of ourselves to it. So speaking about that, and in those terms, what would you say your philosophy is, or your understanding of entrepreneurship is, and how that applies to what we bring to the Fearless Road podcast for our guests and for our listeners?
Well, I would say, entrepreneurship is, I feel like it's a much broader term than it used to be in when you and I were younger and would hear the term entrepreneur, it would bring a very specific set image to mind. And as technology has evolved, as culture and we in our society have evolved, it's really changed the way that individual solopreneurs, or duos like us can launch and start businesses and be entrepreneurs. And I think it's enabled a lot more people to do this with a lot less money than used to be required. Obviously, that varies depending on the business that you're getting into.
Yes.
And it's a journey, right? So there's certain aspects of business that are always in place, right? Like the goal is to make money and bring in an income. And then you have to manage your books. And then you have to keep putting out product, whether it's a visual or audio product like we're doing, or coaching where you're turning out classes and packages and plans for people and doing one-on-one, or you're making a product. It's always, those things are always the same. The rest of it, as far as the relationships that you build, how you build and focus on those relationships, how you promote your product, who you partner with, how you make all those decisions, that's all a more personal decision based on who you are in your business. And so while there's a lot that is very similar and kind of translatable across the board, there is also a lot of room for everybody's unique perspective. And I think that's the most exciting thing about entrepreneurship is you have more ability to think outside the box, because the box is what you make it. And you're not being kept in there by a boss or a corporate entity with a lot of structure to keep you in those spaces.
So as speaking about that concept, I mean, from that point of view that you have, how would you then describe the show, the Fearless Road podcast, to our listeners, taking into consideration your understanding of entrepreneurship and what's the greater scope of what entrepreneurship has become with the gig economy and post-COVID and the internet exploding as it has? How would you share that information and describe it to the listeners?
Well, first off, the Fearless Road, the end goal of the podcast is not to live life completely without fear. It's not fearless. It's the point is to fear less, right? Like to have a less amount of fear, and also to embrace it and work through it and with it. When you're having struggles or moments of fear or anxiety in your business or in your personal life, because as an entrepreneur, the two are very intertwined.
Lots of overlap.
Yes, lots of overlap.
Yeah.
And then it's also exploring very openly and vulnerably. You and I will be sharing our struggles as well as our joys. I think we both very much feel like and recognize a lot of the entrepreneurial podcasts out there uh, tend to be like a lot of influencers, social media. It's a highlight reel. It's all the good and none of the questionable or the bad. Um, and exploring the hard times and working through it and sharing that openly with other people uh, helps us learn and grow and can help others learn and grow from our experience and help them feel less alone. And I think that's really kind of the point of the podcast is to be very very vulnerable and open with these times of transition and trouble and growth and share that so other people can feel seen, um, and maybe help provide them with some tools that can help them when they come across a similar struggle in their life or in their business.
So, speaking of vulnerability, ha ha ha. You're talking about human connection, right? You're talking about making a connection with our guests. And in order to make a connection, a really genuine connection and a meaningful connection, vulnerability plays a huge role in that. What is your connection with A, vulnerability, and B, fear?
um I think my connection with vulnerability has been there a good chunk of my life, at least for a decent amount of time that I can remember. It's
Mhm.
definitely evolved. I think I've become more open and vulnerable over time. Um, I have realized there's a lot more bravery in vulnerability than there is in rigidity and keeping the walls up and not letting people in or not letting myself show through honestly. So I that's the vulnerability part. What was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
We were talking about connection in terms of your connection to vulnerability and your connection to fear, your relationship with fear.
My relationship with fear. That
Mhm.
has evolved a lot as well. I have had some big scenarios, big situations and experiences happen in my life over the past 7 or 8 years. I've moved up to Colorado and back, and I'm about to move up there again. My stepmother, your mother, died in 2016. My mother died in 2019. um, you and I are both helping as much as we can our fathers with their struggles and health issues as they age. And there's a lot to fear in the world, both personally and professionally. I'm about to launch a business on my own outside of this podcast. And this has been a great experience working with Michael, that he made me come along on, talked me into, um, which I'm very willing and happy to be here now. um but doing something on my own, putting myself out there, is there's some fear there. There's a lot of fear there. It's me, like that's going to be how I make money and how I support myself, and so it's very important for me that it be successful. And it's putting myself out there because it's my product. These are things that I will be creating. And I think there was a time in my life where if I tried to do a side hustle business, um, part of me was more about the likes and the engagement. And now I'm definitely in a part where I'm looking for, and I am more authentic and, in what I share and how I share it. It's just how I've evolved going through these experiences and um, being in therapy, and it's really kind of changed my perspective. I think my relationship with fear really boils down to the fact that it is, it's something that has importance in certain situations. And a big part of fear is just designed around keeping us alive as human beings. And so realizing that a lot of my fears are either, you know, really kind of irrational, and then also sitting there and looking at, okay, where does this fear stem from? What is the issue? How can I push past, walk through, learn whatever I need to learn to correct that issue that the fear is around, is kind of where I'm at right now in my working relationship with fear.
And on that note, we're going to take a small break and then we'll be right back. Okay, we are back with Phaedra Chojnacki, guest host of the Fearless Road podcast and co-producer of the show. Fearless foodie Faye, as we like to call her, with a passion for food, cooking, and presenting her love language to the world, who will also be providing an opportunity for us to see a little bit of that love language on the Fearless Road and bringing a lot of amazing insight and information and experience to interviewing our guests with, I think, a very unique perspective on life and her own experiences. And speaking of which, what are the top 3 things that you might say you bring to the show?
Well, number one is my perspective, which is very unique to me. But yes, I have a very, I think, unique take on things. I think my empathy is going to be very helpful on the show with all the vulnerability that we are asking from ourselves and our guests. And then I would say, just maybe my knowledge base. I don't know. But yeah, I think the 2 most important are my individual perspective as well as my empathy will be big.
I'll give you one, and I know that this, maybe I've challenged you a little bit and stumped you on the question. One of the reasons why I invited Phaedra, my sister, to join me on this journey, not just this journey, but also on the podcast specifically, was our, I don't know if it's unique, but I will say easy flow of conversation. One of the things that she and I can do very quickly and very easily is dive down rabbit holes of thoughts and concepts and philosophy about subject matter topics and issues of the day. Specifically, I think surrounding business, politics, God, creation, the universe, all these different things that people get into. But specifically on the Fearless Road, I think it's going to be one of those situations where having a person that bounces these concepts and ideas off of so freely and so easily is going to be a benefit to the show. And that's what I think you will be bringing to the programming.
I agree. I agree entirely. Thanks for the reminder.
Of course.
For some reason, that did put me very on the spot this time.
That's okay. I mean, we're going to learn more about ourselves and how to speak about ourselves to other people. It's one thing to be able to talk about other individuals and what we see in them and the things we find beautiful and amazing and gifting about them. But when it's time to talk about ourselves and do a little bragging or even just external observation of our own skill sets, I think it can feel a little awkward at times, and sometimes we get stumped on how to phrase it without sounding braggadocious or without sounding like we're giving ourselves too much credit, because that's one of the things that I think you and I've talked about this before, that we hold back our gifts from the world. We diminish ourselves a little bit more so we don't appear to be too grandiose. to other people and too overconfident, when in fact what we are simply doing is just acknowledging the things that we have to offer, that we've come to learn after nearly 50 years of experience on this planet. These are real skill sets, these are real gifts, and these are ours. And it's our light that we're no longer going to hide under a bushel. We're no longer going to dim it down and make sure that it doesn't offend or be too bright for anybody else. No, this is my light, and this is what I do. And you are free to disagree or have a different perspective on it. Of course, the world can, but I recognize your light, you recognize my light, and together I think we both hold our candles up very nicely. And I think that's something we're going to do for other people on the show, is give them a chance to show and shine their light for others to see. So I think that's going to be pretty cool. Speaking of, what are the three, if you could list three takeaways you would like listeners to take away from listening to the show? Do you have anything in mind that you think you'd love for them to walk away with?
I think when it comes to our audience and what they get and take away from our episodes, the most important thing is I want them to feel seen and acknowledged, that the struggles that they're going through are not only their struggles. It's not unique to them. These are things that other people have gone through as well. And then the next step from that, I think the next takeaway would be that we are able to, with the knowledge and wisdom of our guests as well as ourselves, hopefully able to provide some tools or some options for people to work through as they have these difficulties or struggles in their business and or their personal life. And I think the third takeaway is simply to show them different perspectives, that there's so many different people out there doing so many different things in so many different ways. And it doesn't have to be a cookie cutter plan in order to be successful. There's so many different ways to do it. And I think that those are the main three things that I really want people to take away when they listen to The Fearless Road.
So, speaking of cookie cutter and all the different perspectives, right, that you just shared about how being an entrepreneur can be done in so many different ways. Traveling this journey can be had and can be experienced from so many different ways. And then perspectives that will be shared on the show can happen from so many different viewpoints. Mm-hmm. Do you think that lends itself well to making this show uniquely different from other entrepreneur shows and podcasts? Why does the world need another show about entrepreneurship? Or do you feel that the show goes beyond just talking about what it means to be an entrepreneur?
I do feel that it will go beyond what it means to be an entrepreneur. And yes, the world does need another entrepreneurial podcast, and it needs this one because of the unique voice and perspective that we're bringing to the journey of entrepreneurship, as well as the fact that it's just a completely different thing compared to what everybody else is putting out there in this world that we have come across at any rate. With that, I had a point. It went away. Okay. You can edit that out or keep it in. Who cares? We're authentic. Sometimes our thoughts go away in the middle of speaking them.
This is true, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to midlife, when at moments your brain simply just dumps a thought and it goes away. It might come back, and that's okay too. And you get to a place, you get to a place where you're like, oh, okay, next, moving on.
Right. Don't know.
It's like when mom used to walk into a room and be like, I don't remember why I came in here, but such is life. Okay, then I'll ask the next question. What excites you about being able to guest host on the show as well as co-produce?
The thing that excites me the most is such a different thing for me to do. This is not anything close to any of my experience in the past. My scope of my career has not come anywhere near recording, being on camera, interviewing for this type of scenario. The only interviews I've conducted have been in the workplace to hire people. So I think learning the behind the scenes, the development, and deciding how we're going to create this podcast on a weekly or regular basis, and just getting into a completely new and different thing, which at first was intimidating, and I was dragging my feet on when you initially approached me, Michael. And then you talked me into it pretty quickly and convinced me, because you see the things in me that I wasn't initially seeing that will be beneficial for the podcast. And so I think, yes, learning and growing in a new and completely different aspect, and adding a wholly new and completely different thing to my resume, so to speak, is very exciting. That, and being able to participate in the interviews and connect you and our audience with some pretty amazing entrepreneurs and business people that I know, as well as speaking with and helping interview the people that you know, or the people that we come across as we grow, which will be very exciting to see.
So you listed what sounded like some pretty amazing achievements, goals, or successes that could be had during the show. Do you think these align with your personal goals right now? That the goals of the show and what we could achieve through our platform are in alignment with your current goals, or do you see new goals coming up for you in the future of 2023 and on into 2024?
I think it's a bit of both. I'm one of those people, instead of doing New Year's resolutions, I did it before it became a thing. But I, for decades, have been coming up with themes for my year as opposed to resolutions. I feel if there's something that we have in our life that we want to change, why wait to change it till the new year or the new week or the new month? Like, if you want to do it, just do it. And tap into that determination and willpower in yourself. When it comes to experiences outside of just me as an individual, I did make a decision to be a lot more open to new experiences this year. Not necessarily a year of yes, but definitely very intentionally considering things that I wouldn't typically do if they were presented to me, and truly weighing that out and seeing, okay, is there a benefit? Is there not? Is there a bit of both? Let's go for it anyway. So while I'm not blindly saying yes to every opportunity that pops up, I am being a lot more open to new things, which I think is very important to my personal growth. So that's the biggest part that brings me here, is that I'm just really being more willing and open to experience new things, whether there's something uncomfortable about it or not. And there is a certain amount of a certain level of that I'm experiencing around this, because it is so new and different, and it'll be interesting to see over time how that changes.
So this is great, because it takes me to our last and final sort of question about the journey. One of the things we're asking our guests to do is to get vulnerable on the show, to tap into that vulnerability, which I feel like, obviously you and I both agree that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a superpower. And we're going to be exploring more of that. And it sounds like you're going to be exploring some of your own vulnerabilities by taking this journey and taking some risks by being a part of the show. Um, how do you see sharing your vulnerability with our guests and asking our guests to be vulnerable on the show? How do you see that playing a role on the Fearless Road?
Well, I think in being vulnerable and honest, both with the guests and with our audience, I think one of the biggest impacts that vulnerability has on us is it and being open and honest and sharing that with other people is it keeps us from getting into a place of shame. Shame lives in the dark. Shame lives when you hide things. And I feel like
Yes.
there's a lot of people, both personally and professionally, that don't share struggles, and then that creates kind of like an inner quandary or inner struggle around some of those things they because they're not sharing the good and the bad. Everybody's life has
Yes.
good and bad, and social media has put us in a very troubling space where so many people only share the good, that not only will this vulnerability provide a breath of fresh air for a lot of people, again, it taps into the audience and our guests knowing that they're not alone, and just kind of helps bring the struggles and the growth and the things learned along the way to light and expose them to a whole new group of people that can benefit from that. And I think that's very important.
I would agree with you. I do think it's very important. And lastly, I guess before we sign off, um, what would you like to leave the audience with today? Specifically, this interview is a bio interview. It is a get to know you interview. It is a first introduction
Mm-hmm.
to our audiences and to people who will be hopefully following and subscribing and liking what we're doing. Is there something you'd like to leave them with?
Be open to possibilities, be open to the unknown. Stepping into new territory has it can be very scary, but it can also take us into new and exciting things where we meet new people or learn something we never would have, or completely change the trajectory of our lives. You never know when a decision is going to take you down a completely different path in life. And so be open to it. Trust the universe. It has your back. And know that the opportunities presented to you, or the struggles that that you have to overcome on your journey, there's something there. There's always a lesson to be learned. There's always a strength to be gained. There's always new perspectives to entertain, and there's always something good. Not that every experience is always positive. I don't believe in that form of positivity. In my perspective, there's always a silver lining to the cloud. Sometimes the cloud is massive and dark, and it's a teeny tiny little silver lining, and it may take years to realize what that thing is. But there's always a little bit of good in every bad, whether it's a lesson we learn and take forward, or new friends made along the way, or a new business idea that crops up and we decide to go with it, or whatever that may be. But I think being open to possibilities is what I want people to do and take away today.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So, ladies and gentlemen, be open to possibilities. And the possibilities, one of those possibilities is to listen, like, and subscribe to the Fearless Road podcast, hosted by yours truly, Michael Devous, and my guest host, my sister, Phaedra Chojnacki, coming this fall in 2023. And we will be spending the summer of 2023 preparing and interviewing and getting this show ready to go. And we're very
Absolutely.
excited to be sharing our journey with you. We're very excited to be sharing our experiences with you, and we will be practicing the art of sharing and exploring and getting vulnerable so that all of us can benefit from the insights, the advice, the stories of the courageous, the brave, and those individuals who are journeying the fearless road together. So please remember, you're not alone. We have your back, and we will explore that journey with you, and we will hold and lift up your light during this show. So remember, stay strong and stay fearless. And we will see you soon. Bye.
Bye.